Hello, everyone. I'm David Morris. I'm the publisher of Lake Drive Books, where we publish books that help you heal, grow, and discover. And I am joined today. I'm honored to be joined today by someone that I have been reading for quite a long time and couldn't believe when the book proposal for our next book landed in my inbox. And it's been quite an adventure so far in getting the book together. It's been instructive and fun and all those things. And I'm glad to be joined by Becky Garrison. How are you doing today, Becky?
No complaints. Lovely fall here in Pacific Northwest, having a good old time.
Yeah, as we record this, it's the fall equinox, and
Hmm.
I'm here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and it's a lovely day. Let me just offer a quick background bio of you, Becky, in terms of the work that you've done, because you've been writing for quite a long time, and we could read a very long bio, but let me just give this shorter one. Um, it's funny. I actually updated it before this call, so I'm not going to read the one that one's not working. Let me try this other one here. Uh, so, uh, as a religious satirist, Becky Garrison served as senior contributing editor for the Wittenberg Door from 1994 to 2008, folks, and has been on its board of directors since its relaunch in 2021. She's the author of 8 books. As a solo author, including Jesus Died for This, a satirist's search for the risen Christ, which is actually in the Lake Drive Books catalog, and Distilled in Washington, a history. Also, she co-edited a book of love letters penned by partners of trans folks to their loved ones. I'm sure that's a really interesting one, as well as contributing chapters to about a dozen other books.
Hmm.
She lives in the Pacific Northwest, where she covers the region's craft culture, including cider, beer, wine, spirits, cannabis, CBD, psychedelics, and the regional festival scene. In other words, you want to hang out with Becky. She's a satirist, and she gets out there and has some fun and is finding a new life for herself. Um, I'm excited to be talking about your new book that's coming out soon as we record this. Just to give folks a little bit of introduction to what the book is about, what you're trying to accomplish with the book, what you hope folks will get out of the book. It's called Gaslighting for God, a satirical guide to save yourself from spiritual narcissists. Did I get the subtitle right?
You did.
It's right behind you, but I can only see part of it.
I know.
Um, so maybe because people can also see Distilled in Washington there. I guess it was explained in your bio, but talk a little bit about what that book is about.
Well, in that book, I describe myself jokingly as having made the connection from covering the Holy Spirit to distilled spirits. And the spiritual connection is the more and more you go to play around the Pacific Northwest, you really can drink in the spirit of the place. There's a very strong connection to the land, very strong connection to the brew pubs, tasting rooms here. They function very, very much like a church. Here in the Pacific Northwest, it used to be the most secular part of the country until the Northeast took over. But the spirituality here is still very evident. There's a very strong honoring of the indigenous culture, very strong Celtic connection to the land, where
Mm,
I feel I can taste this world from the next. And the climate is very similar to Ireland. I have a very similar experience when I walk the woods here that I do when I was walking in Ireland. And so there's people here don't so getting together for a glass of wine, it is a form of communion. It is maybe it's secular, but it's still a form of communion.
it depends on how you define those words, secular
Yes.
and religious, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Let me
Well, I mean,
also,
when I say secular, I mean they're not connected to a church institution. Some
right,
people here will still find solace in a church, a synagogue, or a mosque.
right,
They may want to walk a labyrinth, and even though they don't have any religious connection, they're drawn to that kind of an experience. They may
right.
very strong going to a Buddhist temple or different sources, or they may just go like I do. I find God in the cathedrals of the Douglas firs. That's my cathedral.
Amen to that. Yeah. I do think that in the United States, we tend to define religion in some very conventional ways, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
see it as so much broader. And as a result, we don't even see our own institutions as sometimes very anti-religious and
Mm-hmm.
anti-spiritual. Well, so let's talk about what goes on in some of these institutions in terms of, what's not spiritual necessarily about religion, faith, and spirituality, and that is
Mhm.
the topic of narcissism. Um, Tell me about like why what brought you to the topic of gaslighting for God, writing about spiritual narcissism is a big word that's kind of gotten a lot of traction lately. Um, but you're adding this idea that there's a narcissism to spirituality. What brought you to that topic?
Well, I first started discovering this when I wrote a Holy Hippies chapter in Jesus Died for This. It was, I just was doing this 1 year long pilgrimage. And in doing that, I began to finally have this aha moment. My dad was not just an alcoholic, but a narcissist. And I began to realize that his self-centeredness of both my father and now I began to realize my extended family, in that they were definitely a lot of them were alcoholics, but even if they weren't, even if they sobered up, they still managed to exhibit the same self-centered caring. There was no empathy, there was no compassion, and they had no self-awareness. And from the beginning of my childhood, I was, scapegoated and gaslit by my family because I was always the family truth teller. I was the one who said, so and so is intoxicated, so and so is this. And that later carried on into my professional life as a satirist. When I would make fun of someone, those with healthy egos, they would welcome the critique. I mean, Jerry Jenkins is a good example. We hammered Left Behind. We did Cleft Behind. We did the Plumber's Edition. You name it.
These are the
I
things that
mean,
you wrote for the Wittenberg Door, right? Where,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
If I didn't write it, other people did. But I mean, Jerry Jenkins, which is, I mean, you just couldn't help the whole Left Behind
And
series. It
and for
was
those of you who
so,
don't know what the Wittenberg Door is, go Google the Wittenberg Door. It was its subtitle was the or tagline was the pretty much the world's only religious satire magazine. And
yes.
I don't want to derail you from this thought, but what happened? Why don't we have Wittenberg doors anymore in this world? We need it back.
Well, I think one of the reasons is that it was set up originally by Mike Yaconelli to be a outlet for youth ministers to make fun of all the bizarre stuff that was going on in the evangelical world. So these are a bunch of Jesus freak kind of hippie types like the Mike Yaconellis, and they just wanted to just they want to be part of the church, also make fun of it. But as it continued to go on and on, a lot of people would not get the names. I mean, if I sat there and I pulled up a Wittenberg door from some of these eras, you wouldn't know the names. People don't
Right.
know who the Copelands are. And they were one of our biggest targets. People did know Jerry Jenkins just because Left Behind was that huge. But I could rattle off a whole lot of names and people are like, who's that? So in
Yeah.
order to satirize something, you need to understand what I'm satirizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also enough people left the church to where they didn't really want to stay in it. And the purpose of the door was to help you make fun of church and make fun of what they were doing while they were still part of the institution. And when I was with the
Right.
door, I believe the institution could have been saved. I believe we function as the court jester to the king to keep the church honest. And we were doing that for quite a while, but it just became to a point where that wasn't happening. You know,
And so now you don't necessarily believe the church can be saved. And
as an institution, no.
yeah, and
I
therefore
think
the door's mission kind of ran its course and ran out of its course because people are leaving. They're also feeling that the church can't be saved.
Yeah, and then what replaces it for satire is the Babylon Bee, which has made it very clear that they are not a satirical publication. Their job is to demonize the Marxist left. They've made it very
Right. They're the
clear that
they're
that's their
they're the
goal.
conservative turn in church satire.
And even if their stuff is funny, it's not the point of satire is to criticize anyone who is in power and hold them accountable. That is the
Mhm.
purpose. We smash, as I said, we're engaged in idol smashing. Because once you smash someone's idol, then you can see the glimpses of God or the goddess or that which is holy. But you first need to engage in idol smashing. And over the years, everybody began to develop their own sacred cows. And you could not smash that cow without being called mean, cruel. I mean, every name under the book. And it became clear to me that as the progressives got a little bit into power, once God's Politics blog got published in 2005, they immediately started adapting some of the same tactics of the religious right people by becoming it. I mean, I hear people say to me, it doesn't matter what I believe, it matters what sells. Another
Mhm.
person they get very mad at any criticism because it's impacting their book sales. It's impacting their author speaker guild. And next thing you know, now, how is that any different than what their religious right counterparts were teaching? You know, I use a case study in my book where I started tracing the history of Mark Driscoll from the Young Leadership Network on through to the current battles involving Mark Driscoll. And a lot of people don't realize that the U.S. Progressive Emerging Church and Mark Driscoll used to be really good buds,
Yeah, isn't that
and
amazing?
they split, and but they split over theology, but the thuggery continued. And just the more you point this out, I mean, it's very difficult. And I think if I had become a best-selling author when I first started out, I might have become one of those people because the pressure to platform is intense. The
Yeah.
pressure to be a good little Christian and behave and do all these things. And you watch these people, and they're very careful. Like, I don't know what I can say. I might offend my publisher. I might offend this. So people are not being prophetic. They're putting far more emphasis on their platform.
So what is going on in spiritual communities, faith communities where narcissists are at work, um, and why the title Gaslighting for God?
Well, the reason I did gaslighting for God is that it stems from my own childhood experience. Whenever I would call someone's stuff on the carpet, they'd be like, "No, nothing smells. No, nothing's
Hmm.
here. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're dead wrong." And then if you're the one who continues to raise this up, you're then scapegoated for ruining the party. We would have had a really good Christian celebration here, except you guys had to come in and muck it up.
Right.
And I'm talking about this at an institutional level. It just became clear to me, for example, living in here in Portland, we would have, a murder of someone on a subway once, and more times than we should. And we also have people who, when someone is killed by a bicycle, there's these bicycle ghosts that'll come up. So
Hmm.
when there's a murder, there'll be memorials. There's a desire for the ritual. The church isn't doing diddly. The
Hmm.
church just seems to be quiet. I mean, the response seems to be, you know, bad Bush or bad Trump, bad this, bad that, whoever is the opposition, but they're not really looking at when people are in need and they're hurting and they want someone to take care of them, where do they go? It
Hmm.
used to be a church. It's not there. Might still be a church on some occasions, but it's not the institutional church. They
Hmm.
just don't have the ability or whatever to truly be a prophetic voice. I mean, we need a tutu, we need an MLK, and it's not coming from the churches. I don't know where it's going to come from, and I'm beginning to think that it's kind of like the saying that Marianne Williamson made that quote that we are the change we've been waiting for.
Hmm.
But in order to get to that point, you have to stop wondering, why are you looking to other people who are promising you things and then not delivering? They do not have empathy for you. They do not have compassion for you. And this is going to continue. And the way you have to do it is just to walk away. And I'm starting to see some people, I don't know how many people are going to be doing it, but once you walk away and say, who's going to take care of me?
Right.
And I began to think of the gay community in the 1970s, because this is back. I mean, nobody was taking care of them. Nobody was looking after them. They formed their own network. They formed their own support system. And I think that's what I'm thinking we're going to have to do to get through this. Because I don't think, you can put a different person in the White House and it might not be quite as creepy. It might not be quite as scary, but it might
Hmm.
be worse. We don't, I mean, to expect your political and religious institutions to provide,
Yeah.
they're not. It just, they used to, there was a point when I was brought up to believe and respect my politicians. I was brought up to believe that I could respect adults. I'm now realizing that in many ways I was,
Right.
gaslit.
Right. Right. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So your book is very much to help people name and acknowledge the different kinds of exploitative behavior, manipulation, the gaslighting that goes on in churches. And you have a whole chapter in the middle of the book where you name the different, you call it identifying the types of spiritual narcissists. You talk about exhibitionist narcissists, grandiose narcissists, royal narcissists, um, seductive narcissists. T- talk about what you were trying to do there in identifying all those different kinds of narcissistic behaviors within spiritual communities.
when most people think of this, they tend to think of the bombastic preacher type. They tend to think of, the Jerry Falwell, that type of person as being the spiritual narcissist. The Joel Osteen, the kind of person who goes on Oprah, but they don't realize there's a whole lot of different types. There's some types that I've been drawn into because I wanted to believe in the fact that there is a possibility of heaven here on earth. I still continue to believe that. In many ways, when I listen to one of my heroes, George Carlin, you get the sense he was a failed optimist. He believed that we could do better, which is why he got so PO'd at people.
Hmm.
You could sense that he knew that, why are you doing this? And he also would take cracks at liberals as well as conservatives because he knew that there was this problem, the human condition, to only look at yourself and not look at other people.
Hmm.
And like, for example, two of the narcissists in that, like discussed in the book, don't look very obvious. One is the victim narcissist. They come off as they're always persecuted. Something's always going wrong. And you want to feel your heart goes out to them because, good God, they've been through some stuff. And then you
Hmm.
begin to realize you were played.
Hmm. Hmm.
You were convinced to donate to this other GoFundMe campaign, which is very similar to their GoFundMe campaign for last year. And that no matter what you do, it's never going to be enough. They're always
Hmm.
going to be what they're called an emotional vampire. And the other type that really gets me, and this is the one that I really fall for, is the communal narcissist. We're going to create a heaven here on earth. No, we're not. We're going to create a heaven that I'm in control of. And you're going to help me create this heaven. And it's not, and I can be so easily drawn into that because it's a rising boat lifts all ships. We're all in this together. Go team. It sounds so good. And it's like, we can make this all happen. And then you realize you put in all your heart, your soul, your blood, and nothing. The
Each
moment.
one, each one of your sections in this chapter talks about the different kinds of narcissists, and you do this fun thing. You offer description, you offer a long a sizable bulleted list of identifying markers.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and they're all funny. It's all like written with satirist, tongue in cheek, but with a seriousness to it. Where to find them too.
Mhm.
Like the communal narcissist loves to hang out at fair trade coffee shops, eHarmony, ooh, beer and hymns, theology pubs. Oh, I think I know of examples of that going on right now. How to safely approach is another thing that you offer. So it's fun to read through these things. You'll definitely see the different kinds of leaders that you know, or even congregants, or everyday people who are
And I
who
think
are in
that's
this
to be
kind
to
of.
safely approach is really important because I think that some of these books I've read on narcissism are like, oh my God, you must avoid them at all costs. No, if you're having
Mm,
a lovely, wonderful time, like if you're going to this really fun party and everybody's having a great time and you're getting this good vibe, enjoy it. Enjoy it in small doses. Now, if the person has risen to the level of malignant narcissism, that means they're actually harming people, then yes, think twice about giving you your money. But if
right,
someone is just like a full blown exhibitionist narcissist, only thinking of themselves, and they're going to throw a really big concert, go have a good
right,
time. The
right.
problem is when you start to think this could be a community, this could be something more than just a really fun night. It's kind of like thinking, when you go hear a rock concert, you might be enjoying the concert with these people, but you know, this isn't your best friend; it's your best bud for that night. So I, in safely approaching it, some of them, except for the malignant is the extreme kind. That's the one where it's getting into unethical,
Right,
immoral behavior. And most of my book, I'm focusing on the more malignant side of things because those are the
right.
people you should just. It is not healthy in the least. But
Yep.
just I think for people to download your expectations. Like if you see a victim narcissist, extend your sympathy, but also be mindful of your bandwidth and know and pull back and don't feel guilty. And
Talk
that's
about talk about how like you don't just talk about evangelical Christianity as sort of a you know an embedded narcissism going on in evangelical Christianity, although I mean it's no doubt there. Look at what's going on with all the money that's around mega churches.
mm-hmm,
Uh, those are big, massive social groups, social clubs
mm-hmm,
rather than necessarily spiritual communities.
mm-hmm,
And and the pastors at some of these mega churches don't have accountability structures around them,
Mhm,
above them. Like in the mainline church, there's no pastors above them telling,
mhm,
there's a board, but who really controls the board?
mhm.
There's that kind of thing going on. But you also talk about how there's secular spiritual communities where narcissism is going on. You can offer an example of that, but I'd really like to hear your words about why is spirituality in the United States so narcissistic?
One of my theories is it started. We can always trace this back to when the Pilgrims and the founding of our country. We were founded on American exceptionalism. We were founded that we were a city on the
Yes.
hill, that we were going to become the New Jerusalem. We were going to become this entity. And whenever someone else, like my ancestor Roger Williams, would push back against that, they would find themselves exiled.
Yeah,
You
Becky's a
know,
pilgrim, everybody, by the
yeah,
way.
yeah, I'm related to four of them. But and then Roger Williams. But the Pilgrims were not quite as bad as the Puritans. They just basically, if you didn't believe
Right.
what they believed, you were asked to leave. It was the Puritans under John Winthrop that
Winthrop.
actually would kill people, and
Mhm.
do some rather serious stuff. And also what was going on in England at the time. I mean, this was a very
Right.
much a controlled. So their goal was, we're going to create a new world where we can have religious freedom as long as you think and act just like us.
Right.
And this has been going
Yeah.
on in various iterations. We've had, if you look through this first Great Awakening, second Great Awakening, third, some say we've had a fourth. I'll leave it up to historians to parse that one
Mhm.
out. But every new religious movement has always been with somebody, I found the way, the truth, of the light.
Mhm.
If you don't follow me, then you're a heathen. And
Mhm.
in progressive religion, to me, what happened with progressive Christianity is that the fight for civil rights in the early 1960s, which my father was very involved in, was the last time I saw the church take a true prophetic stance as an institution. And the reason I'm saying is, when the gay rights movement and the women's rights movement came out, my dad and everybody else, the church was kind of like, whatever. That it
Yeah.
wasn't, they weren't really out there marching alongside the women.
Right.
They weren't, when women's, abortion with women's rights were determined in 1973, the religious right didn't really care about that. They just turned it into a political side,
Right.
starting with the formation of the moral majority. And the progressive church was like, well, we're better than that. We're better than the moral majority. We don't need to sully ourselves with politics, which worked out for a while. But
Right.
then I'm now seeing Christians for Kamala, Christians for Hillary, evangelicals for Biden, the new moral majority. And tell me how this is still a politicalized form of the faith. It
Mm.
is not putting itself, it's basically putting, manna instead of something more spiritual. And
Yeah.
but yet with this threat, the reason why the spiritual narcissism can be worse than it's a regular narcissism is that you're told that you're going to hell. You're told that your soul, your essence, the very part of your spiritual being is invalidated if you do not follow a certain prescribed script.
You talk, and this might be how we conclude here. You mentioned it before we went live here, about people are still just not getting free.
Mm-hmm.
They're still kind of stuck in chasing, maybe you might say, a toxic capitalist kind of connected spirituality, intertwined spirituality. Um, Even in your own experience, you've found new freedom. Um, but talk about what you mean by people are still, no matter what, people are still not getting free, no matter what they try, even if they kind of go like faith deconstruction, they might not still be getting free.
Well, this is, I think, for me, the spiritual narcissism is the beginning of understand. Once you can see the patterns, you can then detect: am I in a healthy situation? Am I not in a healthy
Mm.
situation? And a lot of this is, I encourage people to do the work on themselves. Have you undergone, you know, therapy can be absolutely incredible, especially with some of the new cognitive therapies. They were not available in the same way when my parents died of alcoholism in the 70s. That research was not available
Hmm.
about alcoholism. So my dad died, and my brother to this day still maintains that he was a moral degenerate because they did
Hmm.
not have the understanding of alcoholism as being a very complex system. It's physical, it's mental, it's spiritual. What made my dad decided to drink until he died
Right.
from his drinking.
And cognitive therapy, just generalizing, is helps you to understand. It helps bring insight. It brings knowledge. It talks you through those things related to your own life.
Well, it's not really the talking so much as just you can feel it in your body. Like
Mhm.
intellectually, you may know,
I understand.
I don't have to be around that person, but through doing something like EMDR, brain spotting,
Right.
a lot of, and one of these number of different, therapeutic models that are still being developed. This stuff is still relatively being we're about where alcoholism research was in the 1980s right now with this kind of work. So it's very exciting to see that all of a sudden you don't feel that. I still may be annoyed. It's not healthy for me to be around narcissistic energies, but I don't get triggered by it. I don't go, oh my God. I don't
Yeah.
get that nervous kind of like tense up feeling that I used to get, that I'm not, this isn't feel. And I couldn't understand, why was I getting so stressed out? This person isn't an alcoholic. I did a
Yeah.
when I get in narcissistic spaces because I would get triggered. And what you do is, once you can get help for your triggers and you're no longer triggered, you can then recognize the pattern, and then you can figure out, think of this as putting on your own oxygen mask before you try to help people. I'm seeing a lot of people here that want to do good. They want to do the right thing. They want to make change. But because they haven't addressed their own triggers, they continue to find themselves acting out. They continue to find
Mhm.
themselves lashing out. And I even have that to myself. Like if I'm not really taking good care of myself, I'll have a day and all of a sudden I'll just yell at someone and go,
Right.
"What the hell was that about?"
And what does
But
that mean, taking good care of yourself? How do you define that for yourself anyway?
I define it for me as one, getting the help so I can deal with my triggers. Second, learning the meditative, the techniques. Again, like if I yell at somebody immediately, it used to be like I would just stay in that state of anger. Now I know there's certain meditative things I can do. There's certain things I can do with my breathing. I can journal if I need to. I can just develop it. What do you do to calm yourself? For me, a walk in nature always does it,
Yeah.
or going out and gardening or going cycling or doing
Right.
something physical. So it's learning and it's be different for different people. If you're not a nature person, then you'll find another way to dig. But what do you do to get yourself back to a state of equilibrium? And it's a genuine state of equilibrium. It's not just this artificial of, I'm going to be quiet, I'm going to be calm. But how do you get yourself? And it's very hard in today's world. This is why I started doing this very deliberative self-care during COVID, because I was determined I am not going to flip out. So I said, what do I need to do? So I started a regular regimen of taking CBD. I now do microdosing mushrooms. It's been amazingly
Hmm.
very effective. Taking Instead of taking too much alcohol to go to sleep, I'll take a cannabis edible that I've made that is of the
Hmm.
right dosage. So it's finding the things that you do that will keep myself calm, so I don't let myself get to that level. I mean, it's not but the triggers, more or less. I mean, I don't let people get me upset like I used to. I don't like dwell. I don't ruminate. And a lot of that is just getting help for your triggers and then finding out what do you need to do for yourself. And there are other books that'll do that. What this book does is help you to understand when you're in a situation that is surrounded by spiritual narcissists. Because once you have that awareness, you won't enter the situation in the first place, or you can
Right.
exit it much more quickly, or you can just enjoy it. Like if someone's coming off, instead of thinking, you can have an amazingly like short-term fling and a hot romance with a really charming narcissist. You just don't get into a serious relationship and move in with them. And but learn how to enjoy
Everybody should do
someone.
that once in a blue moon.
No,
You're
but I'm
going
just
to no matter
saying.
what.
But I'm just saying, no, obviously, if you're, depending on your relationship situation, I'm not gonna encourage someone to do
Yeah,
something
yeah,
they shouldn't be
of
doing.
course.
But I
You're a
think,
satirist. You can say things. It's all right.
but I'm saying for your own sanity, I can now enjoy people that I couldn't enjoy before because I thought that we were forming a community, and now I can see through their bullshit. I can see that, and I
Yeah,
can enjoy having a good time. I mean, it's like I don't have to be someone's close, intimate, good friend. I don't.
right.
Yeah, you say we're forming a community. No, we're not. But I also don't feel angry like I have to tell that person you're full of shit.
Yeah,
I don't feel that anymore. I just like, well, okay,
yeah.
fine, whatever.
The cartoonist who you know personally, David Hayward, once remarked in a Zoom call I was in that with regard to this big need of people who've left church saying they really miss the community there. And that's often the number one complaint. I've studied
Mhm.
this a lot myself of why, when people leave, that's their biggest emotional felt need is they miss their community. And he made this comment that has always struck me. And he said, well, when I left, I realized maybe I needed that community too much.
Mhm.
Um, Talk about what community might look like instead as people are taking care of themselves, as they are more free, as they're away from, as they recognize the spiritual narcissism and corporate spirituality in the United States. What does freedom look like in community today?
I think we're still working. I think we're still working this out. I think we're coming out of a post-COVID world where we have to acknowledge that we have global PTSD. There's so much shaking going on, and all of a sudden, like I was at this music festival called Pickathon, and I could just be for 3 days. There wasn't any political
Pickathon is
sign.
in like strings.
Pickathon is as in it's a music festival.
Yeah,
It was held in this feral camping ground, and basically for three. I mean, it was feral. It was like feral camping. It was a strong commitment to local food and beverages.
yeah.
A lot of listening to music. A lot of different type of venues that were listening to music, and it's like lying, and you could just be there. People were. It was one of the most non-threatening, non-harassing, and
Non-performative.
non-performative. People were just there, and
Hmm.
people were friendly. They even had this little area set up where the kids could like sell their little stuff, and it was very
Hmm.
kid friendly, but it was also some adult fun in different places because they would have an areas that was.
Were there some performative people there ruining it though for everyone else?
No, I didn't notice it. I mean, maybe this is my first time there, but I think what happens is when you get started at the top and people just say, "I just want to be," and
Yeah,
I've been to,
yeah,
and I've been to like a number of different music events where people just let's just listen to the music.
yeah.
And for one moment, we don't think, are you Democrat? Are you Republican?
Right.
Are you this? Are you that? It's just,
Yeah.
I like this music. I like this. When we
You've
go
talked about
to,
brew pubs this way too.
yeah, I mean, here in the Pacific Northwest, people get together and they want to discuss what is the IPA you're doing? What is the, let's get together. Maybe you want to watch, something on TV, or maybe want to have a fundraiser. A lot of the bands will have like a music night, and people just come together just to sing and dance and celebrate the music. And there's
Yeah,
something that happens, I think, to our bodies when we get in that space, and then we can have the hard
absolutely.
conversations. We can have hard conversations once I get to know you. I mean, I find it very bizarre. I mean, look at something like the Grateful Dead concert that I recommend, that I mentioned in my book, and it's mind blowing the diversity of ranges of people that go to that. And for one weekend, we're together with the music. And
Yeah,
where we go from that beyond, we're gathered together. We both like the same kind of wine. We both like the same kind of beer. Oh,
yeah,
this is an interesting cider celebration. Let's come together and celebrate the fact that someone is creating products that are good for the planet. They're using
yeah,
sustainable means. And we start having these conversations. And then you realize that we're not as different as we thought we were.
yeah.
And it used to be that church used to promise this is the place you can come as you are, but it's not. It's And I think people want to go to, where is a place where I can go where people might care about me.
No, it's
You know,
all
they
about
haven't.
yeah, it's identity.
You
It's
know,
about
I
go
had a
ahead.
friend of mine who said he hadn't been to this one bar for like 4 years. He went back, and all of a sudden, he immediately knew his order. And that was, he said, this felt like my community for me. These are people that
Yeah,
cared that I was gone. They cared that I came back. They didn't want me just for my money. That
right.
they wanted to have me here. Now, granted, of course, there is that fact that some of these places you do pay a little bit, but in looking at that, just watching how people come together, they're discussing something besides, it's not as banal as the weather, and it's not as hot button, but it's just, let's just come together and chill. I mean,
Hmm.
that's the way I found that with some cannabis communities, with coming together to, celebrate, plant-based medicine and just different,
Yeah,
but it can very easily go off the rails, which is why I think that the book is important to recognize the signs that,
yeah,
this is really, I could really be here, and to really relax. And once you see that the signs are there, that this is a healthy community,
yeah.
then you can really relax and really start to be.
Well, Becky, thank you so much. I'm really excited about this book, Gaslighting for God, How to Save Yourself from Spiritual Narcissists, not just as a tool to kind of laugh and recognize what's going on, but also to free yourself and put yourself on a path to freedom.
Mhm.
Where should people find you, Becky?
My website is beckygarrison.com. Facebook, it's Becky Garrison Writer, or on Instagram, it's Becky_Garrison.
Substack?
And Substack is Gaslighting for God Substack.
Yeah. Follow Becky. She's always out writing and
Mhm.
always has interesting things to say. It's not just about religion and spirituality, but it's about craft culture, just as it said in the bio at the top of this
Mhm.
interview. Thanks again, Becky.
Okay, you're welcome.